In this video, I'm going to reveal 4 sleeper running backs I'm targeting later in 2024 fantasy football drafts. I'm Nick Whalen from RotoWire. Let's get right into it. We start in Dallas with Rico Dowdle. Now, Dowdle's a bit polarizing. Some people like him. Others think he's nothing special. Maybe the Cowboys make an addition to that backfield at some point. Who knows? But as of right now, I like the position Rico Dowdle is in. I like the acquisition cost. I'll start by saying there's a reason he's a sleeper, right? He's a career backup who's never commanded the lion's share of carries in Dallas. We've seen his potential in short bursts, but the Cowboys have always kind of used him as more of a bit player. He was never in a true timeshare with Tony Pollard last season. With that said, Tony Pollard is obviously gone. He's in Tennessee, and Ezekiel Elliott is now back in the mix for the Cowboys. We're seeing Zeke go off the board on average is about the RB 41. That's his ADP in the NFFC right now. Elliott was decent last season, better than expected perhaps, in a pretty bad situation. I might be putting it lightly with the New England Patriots. He caught a ton of passes, but obviously he's not the same back that he was at his peak early in his career with the Cowboys. Certainly not somebody who's going to command a true RB1 workload by any means this season. Dowdle, he's going off the board as the RB 49, about 2 full rounds later than Ezekiel Elliott in the NFFC. Both of these guys could end up being values at their current ADP. Dallas was the #1 scoring offense in the NFL last season. That was despite Tony Pollard having a wildly disappointing season. Cowboys were the only team in the NFL to score on more than 50% of their drives in 2023. Comparing Dowdle to Ezekiel Elliott, Dowdle's clearly the more explosive of the two. It's not even close at this point. We've had reports out of camp in the last week that he's been clearly the best running back on the field. Shouldn't necessarily be a surprise given what the rest of that RB room looks like. But even if you're worried about Ezekiel Elliott vulturing touchdowns, which to me is a very real concern, Dowdle's being drafted late enough that there's very little downside here when it comes to taking a flyer late in the draft. He's going after guys like Ty Chandler and Marshawn Lloyd. Chandler, to me, very, very clearly the #2 behind Aaron Jones in Minnesota. And when it comes to Lloyd, there's a decent chance he's a distant RB3 in Green Bay behind Josh Jacobs and A.J. Dillon. If we remove injury concerns from the equation, very few backs in the 12th or 13th round of a competitive league have fantasy starter potential. And to me, Rico Dowdle is one of them. Now, if Dallas goes out and adds another running back or Dowdle struggles out of the gates, taking him that late in the draft, it doesn't kill you. If you have to part ways with him, so be it. To me, the risk is worth the reward when we're talking about what could be the 150th, 155th pick in your draft. Next on our list, Kendre Miller of the New Orleans Saints, ADP of 160 in the NFFC over the last week. He's the RB 53 during that span. Obviously, the New Orleans Saints have Alvin Kamara in place. He's coming off of a productive season, but a lot of that production was weighted heavily toward his pass catching. And yeah, that's typically the case with Alvin Kamara, of course. He's one of the best pass catching backs in the NFL and has been for several years. But last season was even more of a dramatic slant toward that receiving than what we've seen in years past. Kamara hauled in 75 passes in just 13 games, but his rushing numbers, they started to take a significant step back. He ranked in the 15th percentile in broken tackle rate, 27th percentile in yards after contact, 24th percentile in yards after the catch. He also posted his lowest yards per target and yards per touch figures of his NFL career, and he found the end zone on only 1 of those 75 receptions. Now, when it comes to Kendre Miller, he was injured for most of last season, but in the 2 games in which he logged double-digit touches, he put up 169 total yards, nearly 8.5 yards per touch. Small sample, of course, but hey, that's all we have to work with right now. Keep in mind, Miller was a 3rd-round pick in 2023, clearly someone the Saints have ambitions to utilize more this season. Kamara, he's still going to be Kamara. He's the heart of this offense, but he's entering his age 29 season. There's a ton of mileage on his legs. Saints also have a new OC in Clint Kubiak, who should bring a fresh look to this offense. For a player going in the 160s, we're talking 13th round right now. Kendre Miller has significantly more upside than the vast majority of other running backs going in that range. I'm targeting him, grabbing him in as many drafts as I can. If you're enjoying this video, please give us a like. Please subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel. Helps us out a ton. We really appreciate it. Kimani Vidal of the LA Chargers. Chargers backfield, it's set up well for Vidal to make an immediate impact in year 1. He's a 6th-round pick out of Troy, but measures up better than most of the backs in that range. Vidal ranked 2nd in the nation in missed tackles forced last season. He was near the top of the country in terms of explosive play rate. Not something the Chargers have a ton of in their backfield right now. Vidal, also an excellent pass protector, which is huge for any young running back, especially one who's only 5'8". Vidal also averaged over 11 yards per reception at Troy last season. When we take a closer look at the landing spot with the Chargers, There's certainly competition here, but that competition comes in the form of veterans Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. Now, the Chargers brought in Greg Roman this offseason, so it's probably not a coincidence that two ex-Ravens ended up in that backfield. Roman may have familiarity, he may have comfortability with that duo, but we know what Gus Edwards' ceiling is at this point. He's a lower-end NFL starter who doesn't give you a whole lot catching the ball out of the backfield. Yeah, Dobbins was once a promising young running back, but he's on the short list of the biggest injury risks at the position at this point in his career. Not only is he working his way back from a torn Achilles, he's also torn his ACL and his LCL in the past. He had a major hamstring injury as well. And to me, frankly, it's unlikely that he'll ever be the same guy that he was coming out of Ohio State. Looking at the acquisition cost for Kimani Vidal, he's currently the RB 54 in NFFC ADP over the last week. That means he's available in the mid 160s in most drafts. He'll even go a round or two later in non-high stakes leagues, and more casual formats will probably go undrafted altogether. As a sixth rounder, as the non-familiar face in Greg Roman's offense, I'm not necessarily expecting Vidal to hit the ground running and see a huge workload right away. I don't think that's realistic, but with two pretty underwhelming, pretty injury-prone backs ahead of him, it's not difficult to envision the path to Vidal being a difference maker for the Chargers as the season wears on. So if you're in a shallower league, maybe you don't even need to burn a late round pick on him, but keep a very close eye on Vidal's usage early on. He's also a guy who could see his stock rise during the preseason. So he'll be somebody I'm watching very, very closely over these next few weeks. The fourth and final back on our list, we're going out to Seattle, and we're going to talk some Zach Charbonnet. But Nick, the Seahawks, they already have a running back going in the top 60 picks in Kenneth Walker. Why should we care about Zach Charbonnet? That's true, they do, but I'm not sure the gap between Walker and Charbonnet should be as massive as it is right now. Charbonnet is currently the RB 42, usually comes off the board in the 120s. So we're talking 11th round, maybe the 10th round. When you're just firing darts, you're looking for some running back depth. But Walker was the lead back last season. Charbonnet actually posted slightly better success rate numbers, as well as better yards per attempt, yards per touch, yards after contact. He also caught more passes on more targets than Kenneth Walker did last season. Keep in mind, we have a completely new coaching staff in Seattle for the first time in a very long time. Fresh set of eyes on this roster, fresh set of eyes on this backfield. Now, we can't say for sure what new offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb will want to do, but there's certainly a chance he'd prefer this to be more of a true split, maybe prioritize Zach Charbonnet's pass-catching ability. All signs point to this being a more up-tempo offense under Grubb. We know that. I think that plays to Charbonnet's advantage as well. Seattle was dead last in pace of play last season, despite ranking as a top half of the league offense. The Seahawks ran the fewest offensive plays in the NFL in 2023. We expect that number to rise significantly in 2024. And the workload numbers last season between Kenneth Walker and between Zach Charbonnet, a lot closer than you might think. Walker was on the field for about 48% of Seattle's offensive snaps, but Charbonnet wasn't far behind at close to 46%. Charbonnet actually outsnapped Kenneth Walker in each of the final two games of the regular season. Now, yeah, Walker was battling a shoulder injury late in the year, so that may have been part of the equation. But the bottom line is, I'm not sure there should be a 70, 75 pick gap between Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. Seattle invested second-round draft capital in Charbonnet for a reason. It's not like he's some 6th or 7th rounder who's just showing a couple of flashes. They want him to be a big part of this offense. I don't even mind the cost on Kenneth Walker. I like both of these backs. I do think there's a better chance that Kenneth Walker ends up as the true lead, but I'm still willing to jump ADP for Charbonnet under the hope that he sees an expanded role in year 2. And right now, you're basically getting him at his rookie year floor.